Before we jump into today's episode, which focused on the very important topic of athlete mental health, I did just want to give a trigger warning that we do discuss suicidal ideation as well as suicide rates among NCAA athletes. And so, with that, here is today's episode. Sup, y'all. I am your host, Tayler Onion, and this is Hang Time, where we focus on amplifying the stories of women in sports. We are back this week with Emily Huston, the founder and CEO of HomeTeam, which is the first platform built to centralize athlete mental health and transition support. Emily, welcome. Let's get some hang time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about HomeTeam. I want to talk about what you're building there, but I think we really need to start with our common denominator, which is volleyball. You are a former volleyball student athlete. Can you start us off by talking a little bit about your student athlete experience?
Oh yeah. Well, it started at a somewhat young age, young at the time. I feel like athletes these days start their sport much earlier than I did, but I was always an athlete. I found volleyball to stay in shape for basketball. Um, but I fell in love with volleyball, and I always say that volleyball was my first love. So I don't know about you, but it was volleyball or nothing kind of mindset. I started in the eighth grade, and then was just a gym rat. You couldn't get me out of the gym, and I excelled pretty quickly. By the time I was in high school, or probably like a sophomore. Well, I as a junior, I was on the USA Junior National team.
Okay.
So, and then by the end of my sophomore year, I had already committed to a D1 program. So I played for Baylor, continued in the USA pipeline, and then I retired, which I'm sure we can get more into. But yeah, I retired, and then after a couple of years of a break, I went back and played professionally.
I love it. So similarly, my cousins played soccer when I was growing up, and I wanted to play soccer and be like them. So I played basketball to get in shape for soccer. And then as it
Uh-huh.
turns out, my school didn't have soccer, but we had
Uh-huh.
basketball. So I kept playing that, and then played with the boys actually growing up. And once we had a girls basketball team, then I was able to play volleyball. So similarly, I didn't have much interest in it to begin with, but it very
Yeah.
quickly became the thing obviously that I was most interested in and had the most fun
Yeah.
around. So I love
What
that.
was your
The
position?
I was an outside hitter, and I mean,
Okay.
growing up, I played anything from setter to middle, and then really kind of settled into the outside position.
Cool. That's a fun
Yeah.
position. I was a setter.
Okay. Very good. Very good. What was your? So you mentioned that you waited a couple years and then you played overseas. What was your favorite place you played professionally?
Well, I only played 2 seasons or 2 years overseas. I played in Finland my first year and Switzerland my second year.
Okay.
But honestly, I get this question a lot. So I've lived abroad outside of volleyball as well. As a child, I lived in Mexico, and
Okay.
then I've also lived in Argentina and then in Europe. And people always ask me like, "Well, what's your favorite?" And I tend to, I don't know, I tend to not have a favorite. I think that every country and every adventure has, strong, like, I don't know, just strong favorites within it, right? Like,
Mm,
it's hard to say that for me, it's hard for me to say, like, oh, this is my favorite country. Because,
sure.
like, Mexico and Finland are wildly different, right? And so
Yes.
I'm not going to be able to compare. It's definitely not like an apples to apples type thing. So I love Mexico for Mexico's, reasons there, and then I love Finland for its unique reasons, things that are unique about Finland.
Okay. So you played for a
Yeah.
couple of seasons then professionally, a couple different spots there. Tell me, we talked a little bit about after those 2 seasons, you went into retirement. I'm assuming that experience during your retirement is maybe what led you to start Home Team and what you've built there. Obviously, that was several years later, but let's talk
Yeah.
about what led you to start Home Team. How did we get here?
Yeah, yeah. You're 100% correct. It absolutely, is part of, the gaps that I experienced and what brought me to home team. So as an athlete, as many, athletes they become injured. And this is while I was a current athlete, I experienced injury and was not able to play. I was depressed during that time. And then in my first retirement, the gap between playing undergrad or playing at Baylor and then playing professionally, I had retired for about 3 years
Mm.
of playing at like a really high elite level. I was still playing volleyball. I was playing sand volleyball and just having a lot of fun, which I think ultimately made me a better volleyball player. But during that time, I had a vision for my life, and that vision was just not happening. And transition out of elite sport is a thing all in its own that we can go into if you'd like. But during that time, I became depressed again. And it was during that time where I was like really looking for help. And I was a bit scared because I was having suicidal ideation, but also just
Mm.
very stuck. And I did not know how to get out of that. Um, of course, there were like therapists around, but nobody that really understood what I was going through. It was in that depressive thinking where I could not find help, and I ended up having to just basically help myself. And I remember asking myself, like, well, you need to do what you're good at and what you enjoy. And my depressive brain said, well, the only thing you're good at is volleyball. And of course, that was not true. Of course, I had other strengths. It was just in that time that I couldn't see, these anything other like that was outside of volleyball. And because of my depressive brain, like thought that that was a good idea, I went back to playing volleyball professionally. Now, I don't regret that decision. Like, I think that at that time, it did solve the problem. Like, I got out of my depression, and going and playing a sport that you love and making money, even if it's just a little bit, doing something you love and seeing the world is not a bad thing, right? So, yep. So let's fast forward. Then I ended up retiring from volleyball professionally due to an abusive coaching situation, and happy to
Mm.
go into that if you'd like. I've learned that trauma in sport is much more common than people tend to really understand. Um, and then, yeah, I came back and went to grad school. I studied counseling psychology. Ultimately, did not pursue my license. I went down a different path and I started working for private single family offices. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, most people do not. They are financial institutions for extremely wealthy individuals. So, an extremely wealthy individual will bring all of their finances in house
Mm.
and all of the operations that are surrounding that. So, you think about like all of the assets that they have. So this could be multiple homes around the world, islands, super yachts, that type of thing. So that's why they bring it all in-house. I did that for about a decade, got phenomenal world-class operational experience, and ultimately decided that I needed to realign with who I was and what lights me up, and that is sport. And so I put myself in transition again to really just figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And I didn't know. I didn't know what that was. But in that transition, I reconnected with a former teammate of mine, and she became an author. She wrote a book called Always an Athlete.
Mm.
And her book describes the developmental milestones of an athlete from the time that they're very young, from that time all the way to the top of their career, which is usually retirement,
Mm.
regardless of the level. But she described those developmental milestones as if the athlete's climbing up a mountain. And her book um, said that when an athlete gets to the top of that mountain and they retire from their sport, it's as if the athlete falls off a cliff. And that's exactly what I experienced. I experienced this free fall effect. You leave everything, everything changes, right? Like, not only do you leave your community, do you leave your sport, do you leave your identity, but how you exercise changes, right? Like, it goes from working out for with a purpose to exercise, which are two totally different things. Eating something is, that we do every single day, your relationship to food changes. And because of these complexities, there's a lot of like dynamic shifts that can happen for an athlete,
Hmm.
um, which creates this free fall effect. And there's no parachute, there's nothing to catch you. And this was just 2 years ago. And her book essentially ended there. There were no next steps. There were no like, here's some best practices. Here's how you can help yourself. Here's some resources. And I don't critique her for that. Um, what the thing that I critique is the system. And it was in that moment that I saw the systemic failure that's occurring for all athletes. And the fact that I experienced that, whatever, how many ever years ago that was, 15 or 17 years ago, this is now a while ago, that today's athlete is experiencing the exact same thing. I know that what I went through is wrong, and that needed to change. And so, yeah, so I decided to charter the path and see if we could make change, and that's where our home team began.
We used to talk about our experience as a train that you don't get off, right? And most people, it's 4 years, although since COVID happened, it seems like sometimes it's 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Who knows how many waivers folks are getting with NIL, the same thing now. But we used to talk about it as if it's a train. So you get on your freshman year and there's no stops, right? You just ride it all the way. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the track and it's like, all right, see ya. So just what you described, that there's not necessarily something in place for athletes to be able to work through those next steps. If you're lucky, you attend an institution that has a really great student athlete development and maybe even a sports psychologist who's on staff and can help you kind of put together some of those next steps. But in most cases, that's not the case. And so I love to hear just kind of what you're thinking through and how you got to the point of home team. One of the things I noticed on the website was that you are centralizing athlete care and community. And it seems like there's a really big focus on mental health for athletes. I think both current and former. But what does that mean, the centralizing athlete care and community? What does that mean for home team and how you're delivering services to athletes?
Yeah, well, so we see these as two separate things. So one is the communal aspect. When Home Team began, we started a community for athletes that were in transition. Um, that was actually a really difficult model initially. And in terms of having no spend and essentially like organic growth, it was really difficult to meet athletes. But one of the things that we found in our pilot is that we were bringing athletes in for the pilot program that was very successful. It was high impact for them in these moments of change. But we also brought in clinicians. And we brought in different clinicians and not necessarily mental health providers, but other people that were familiar with the athlete landscape and ecosystem to support them through this change. And one of our hypotheses was that if we brought in these providers to meet with the athletes, that they would build a relationship with those providers, and then they would be more likely to go to them. We found that was true. And so what ended up happening is because of the no budget for spend and in marketing, we ended up focusing on the providers themselves. And our community in just a matter of months has grown to over 200 providers. In the athlete mental health space, it can be a very isolating experience. And so I love like systems thinking, and I love the butterfly effect and just the ripple effects. And so I was like, not only can we serve these providers who are working in this space and serving athletes, but therefore we can actually reach even more people by supporting them. So we decided to double down on the providers. Our community is called the Collab, which is short for the collaborative, and it's a multidisciplinary space for athlete-centered professionals. So we do have an emphasis on mental health, but we invite all professionals in the athlete ecosystem, because one of the things that we see in these gaps is that there are amazing clinicians and coaches and administrators and athletic trainers, um, public speakers, health advocates who are in this space and doing amazing work at a level of expertise, but they're working alone and they're working in silos. And so
Mm.
that is one of the things that we aim to do with the collab is to reduce the silos and increase um, the intersectionality of this work to be able to really support athletes. So that's one thing that we're doing. Eventually, we will have a community for athletes, but it just wasn't the right time, and we had a ton of momentum in this other space. So that's the direction that we went. In terms of centralizing, that it really is what it is. It sounds like a simple concept, and honestly, it shocks me that nobody has done this yet. I'm sure, after our success, that there will be other people that are copying, but that's a good problem to have. So what we're doing is we're building a platform that centralizes athlete-centered care. So you're right, there are psychologists and there are mental health providers on campuses now, not only for the general student body, but for the athlete student body. There are some issues about that setup that we can go into. But one of the things that's really needed is just to pouring all these professionals into one location so that athletes can find the care that they're needing. And it's not only the athletes, it's also the people that are connected to the athletes. So at the professional level, it could be a partner, right? It could be a husband or a wife. It could be um, a parent, right, at the youth level who is seeking to advocate for their child, whether that be performance training or mental health support that's appropriate to athlete-centered care. Also, coaches. Coaches are a really big part of this conversation. They set the tone for their teams, right? And like, what is a healthy team? What is a healthy um, what's a healthy work environment for these athletes? And if they're not well, then believe me, like nobody else is well either. So, um, so yeah, that's what we're doing. It's this platform not only brings together the mental health professionals, although, like as you noted, again, that is where we're starting. But we see a need for physical therapy. We see a need for psychiatrists, financial planning. So anybody that serves an athlete eventually will come into the system.
What does it look like for, let's say I'm an athlete, or let's say I'm on the partner or parent side of the athlete experience? What does that experience look like to be essentially a member or involved with HomeTeam? And then I also want to know from the provider side, like what is that experience? So basically from the two sides of what you're offering, what's the experience like?
Well, we hope easy. We want to reduce, barriers to entry. Anytime somebody is reaching out for help, it's usually because like they really need help in that moment.
Mm.
Culturally and, because of stigma, people wait until they're essentially desperate to get the help and the support that they're needed. So we want to reduce all entries to care, and make it as easy as possible. So our platform, we don't have a referral process yet, but that's something that's in our roadmap. So if if a partner wants to refer their significant other, like who may be a professional athlete to care, that's something that eventually they will be able to do. But that's not a function that we have set up yet. In terms of the parents, we do have a search function for them. So they can go in and we have a matching flow and they can say like, this is the sport, because there's a lot of specificity across sports. Like a football player's experience is wildly different than equine, for example, or somebody who's a skier, right? And different dynamics, different cultures, different stigmas, all that type of stuff. So anyway, so we have a filter through sport. We have a filter looking by language, by whether it's virtual or in person, cost, specialization, whether it's mental health or performance related. So yeah, essentially we're trying to increase the efficacy of the match by doing that.
What do you think has led to the shift? We've talked a little bit about kind of providers that are available on campus, whether it's to the general student population or to student athletes specifically. I know the USOPC has added resources, mental health resources in recent years. The NCAA has a ton of mental health resources that they've added as well. Several pro leagues have started to add kind of team or league clinicians to that space as well. What do you think has led to the shift of not only kind of mental health and just general well-being being a frequent topic of conversation within sport, but what do you think has led to actually like teams and leagues and conferences actually kind of putting their money where their mouth is as far as let's hire staff and let's put resources in place and kind of put some money behind this to help the athletes there?
Yeah. So this is a easy and difficult question to answer. There are so many different layers, and there were a lot of different questions in there. So let me see. I would say that the two things leading to these shifts are one, athletes dying. Um, Athletes are dying at rates that do not match the same age of their non-athlete peers. So over a 10-year, it was actually over 20 years, but in the last decade, death by suicide of NCAA athletes doubled. That should be alarming to all of us. Unfortunately, many people look at sport as a protective factor, meaning something that is really good for their child, and it is. But at these really elite levels, primarily at the D1 and the D2 level, sport is no longer a protective factor. It is now a risk factor because that's where we're seeing these rates of suicide. The other thing that I would say is that mental health has always been around, but people are now beginning to speak about it. Stigma is reducing, and mental health literacy is going up at the same time. And so, in our younger generations, with mental health literacy going up, there's just even more demand from younger people, and so this is something that is increasingly important, especially with athletes, who are public figures. There is a trend now, and I wouldn't say it's a trend. I hope that it's just the beginning of people talking openly about their mental health struggles, because it's a very normal thing. 30% of people at any given time are experiencing mental health issues. And that is the same for athletes. So if you have a team of 10 people, there are 3 people who and it may not be the same people, right? But at any given time, there are 3 people who are struggling at a clinical level of need. So that's a significant portion of our population, and of athletes. I want to, if you're okay with it, I'd love to go into a bit more detail about your question, because what we see, not just me and HomeTeam, but the athlete mental health landscape is seeing is really important to understand.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so at the NCAA, you mentioned that they have mental health. They've instituted mental health. I forget the word that you used, but
Resources.
yes. Yeah, okay. So let's say resources. They are not resources. They are guidelines. And the word guideline is really important because it makes it so that at the institutional level and at the athletic departments that nothing is required. So these are mental health care best practices, essentially. If you go and look at the language, they're best practices. So one of the things that we would like to see, and when I say we, I mean I'm representing the athlete mental health advocacy landscape, is systemic change. So for example, an athlete has to go and get a physical every year. Well, to add 6 questions, to that list of their physical, this screen for their mental health really could support that process. In terms of at the athletic department level, funding is an incredible topic of equity, I would say, when it comes to this subject. Even the athletic departments who do employ mental health providers, I can say that it's not pretty. And there's a lot of reasons that I say it's not pretty, is because one, there's typically one clinician for about 500 athletes. That's it's not possible to serve 500 athletes and have have that level of caseload. So that this is not every athletic department that has that ratio, but it's probably most who do, if they even do have these providers on campus, are are available. It's extremely rare for there to be more than one or two. The other thing is that athletes are incentivized not to go to the clinicians that are within our athletic department, and that's because stigma still exists at the higher, sorry, not the higher levels, but meaning with the coaching staff, they and even administrators. I hear all too often, unfortunately, that if an athlete reaches out for help, that they lose playing time, they are released from the team. So there are incredible barriers to seeking help. And they may want to get help and they may know where to go for help, but they feel like they simply can't.
Mm. The clinician piece is so huge, right? Because not every athletic department has the resources, as we talked about, to even have a sports psychologist or a counselor or anybody who's on staff like that. I think that's a huge thing. And for if you have the ability financially to offer those services or to have somebody who's in-house, I do think it makes a big difference, as opposed to, if you're a student athlete who has to physically go across campus to access those resources, there's a difference there, right? The ease and kind of just the access of being to stay within your own building and connect with somebody who already is involved with your athletic department and all of those pieces. I want to come back really quick to I use the word resources, and maybe initiatives is the better word. I know within leadership development within the NCAA, which I facilitate with, have throughout the years, there is a ton of focus there in everything that we do that weaves in mental health discussions and how do we kind of help ourselves, but also help teammates or anybody who's kind of in that space. There are tons of kind of mental health best practices, but there's also research that has come out. And maybe that's the space where the NCAA has kind of put in some work to build out their NCAA student athlete health and wellness study. Again, there's just been more of a focus, I think, in recent years. It's not where it needs to be, of course, and that's part of what HomeTeam is solving here too. But I think that focus and just thinking through some of those kind of more visible athletes. I'm thinking of Naomi Osaka and Kevin Love and some of those major athletes who have spoken out, Simone Biles, in recent years, and just what an impact that has had. I'm curious to know your kind of vision, knowing all these things, right? That there's kind of a shift and certainly more of a focus now on these things and on mental health. What is your vision for the future of HomeTeam and maybe the future of the conversation for mental health for athletes?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would love to see the number of death by suicides decrease. That is, if we could see those numbers come down, then we know that we're doing something right, right? So ultimately, that's why we're here is to make sure that no one is dying. Suicide is, but it's making sure that there are these systems in place built around the athletes, as you said, for access and a number of other dynamics to make it accessible to them. So, in terms of like what I hope for HomeTeam is that I think that HomeTeam solves a lot of these problems. In that from an access perspective, from a best care perspective. We have the ability to in this platform for different providers to be able to continue to well, for different providers to collaborate with one another.
Mm.
So, for example, you can have somebody who um, has an anxiety disorder or is depressed, and is getting treatment for that, but also has a comorbidity of an eating disorder.
Mm.
That does not mean that the clinician is able to work with both. And eating disorders and or disordered eating and disordered exercise among in the athlete population is quite high. So having an athlete-centered like provider who really understands that, those two people can work together to be able to support the athlete in their recovery. So the other thing is that by centralizing care on our platform, it allows for a level of anonymity and confidentiality that isn't always possible in the athletic department space. So yes, it's wonderful that athletic departments are putting a clinician like right next to the weight room. Like that's amazing, right?
Mm.
But what happens when your coach, who is in the weight training session, I don't know, I know our coach came to weight training sessions, and you need to go to therapy. You're outed right there. So, it doesn't, that unfortunately, like very well intentioned, and while it is very promising to me, it doesn't work for all athletes at least, right? And so, what are the solutions to that? And those are the things that we need to be thinking of and finding ways for people to get care when they really need it.
Yeah. The hope, of course, is that your coach is in full support of that and is hopefully also not the reason that's causing you to go
Yeah,
see
unfortunately, that's just simply not the case. Like,
yeah, most times. Yeah. It's
yeah,
a,
I would like to see that change.
yeah.
And I do have hope that that will change, if anything, with time. Because, today's athletes are tomorrow's coaches. And that is the other thing that I see. And I sometimes I fear that this sounds grandiose, but I feel that strongly that home team can change the world
Mm.
because athletes getting care are tomorrow's, not only tomorrow's coaches, but they're tomorrow's leaders, they're tomorrow's politicians, they're tomorrow's parents, community members. And the power of an athlete, we've already seen this, you just named all the names of these very visible athletes. The power of an athlete getting mental health care, these are, athletes at the NCAA are people's heroes, right? Like, they are leaders whether or not they want to be. And like when you see your hero taking care of themselves and, leading courageously in that way, like you better bet like those little kids and even the adults, like they are going to get the care that they're needing to, right? If so, I think that this has the potential to be able to help millions of people that will never know that we're helping, right? But that, but by helping one person, that we can then help so many others.
I'm going to shift into kind of our final two questions here. So if
Yeah.
there's one message that you could deliver to athletes about mental health, what would that be?
Well, I'll just lean on my one of my favorite quotes that I always go back to, and it's not necessarily about mental health, but and this could be for anybody. The quote is by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a Buddhist quote, and the quote is, "Peace in oneself, peace in the world." And if you really sit with that, like it can mean so many different things. And ultimately, I hope that people do have peace with themselves. And because if we are peaceful or if we are grounded or we are mentally well, right, we are going to go out into the world and we are going to share that. And we are going to impact others in that way, right? Like if you think of a time when you're not well, I can think of myself like when I'm really anxious or I've in a rush or I'm just not in my best headspace, that's the moment when I am being a jerk. Like I honk my horn or something. Whereas, most of the days of the year, I'm not honking my horn, right? But for whatever reason, I feel impatient that day. I feel like I need to honk my horn, right?
Right.
And that's not how I like to live. But I think it's a very human thing, right? So, but if we can take care of ourselves, then we will take care of others.
Absolutely. All right. If you could, namesake of the show question here, if you could get some hang time with any woman in sports, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. Uh, any woman in sport. Maybe Billie Jean King.
Mm,
She's just an icon. She has done so much for the world, and she just continues to put herself out there in such brave and courageous ways. And she truly is an icon. I really admire her career and the span of her career and the work that she's doing today to elevate other women. Yeah, she's amazing.
she is truly one of one when it comes to
Yeah,
not just women's sports, but sports, I think, in general.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Where can listeners get involved? Where can they support or follow you or Home Team?
They can go on LinkedIn. That's a really great space to follow me and to follow updates in regards to athlete mental health. Of course, there's our website, hometeamgo.com. We are preparing to launch the marketplace, so that will be up in probably about 2.5 to 3 weeks. So yeah, just continue to follow more for that and changing the world.
I love it. Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to join me and get some hang time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, we will see you back in a couple of weeks. Until then, you can follow along at HangTimeP0D across social media and check us out, hangtimep0d.com. We'll see you next time.